From Central Indiana's #1 news source, this is Fox 59 Tonight.
Hey, good evening. Thanks for joining us here on Fox 59 Tonight. I'm Cameron Riddle. Glad to be with you. Thank you for downloading our smart TV app on your Roku, Fire TV, Apple TV, and Samsung TV. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you are subscribing so you never miss any of the conversations we have every night at 8 o'clock. We pretty much talk about everything from the White House to your house. And on this show, we'll find ourselves right there somewhere in the middle because look who's back in studio. It is Michael Paul Hart of District 20, Indianapolis City County Council. Republican is here. It's been pretty quiet on your side of town, right?
Super quiet. Nothing going on over there.
Nothing going on. Nothing happening with you. Thanks for coming. You were with us earlier this summer, we believe it was. And so glad to have you back so we can catch up and talk about all the things in District 20 and what's happening with Michael Paul Hart. So where do we start?
We could start data center. We could start with different titles nowadays.
Well, let's start with different titles because last time you were here, you were caucus leader of the Republicans on the City County Council. Now just a leader of District 20.
Certainly. So, it's been an interesting, not an interesting change, right? I mean, I'm still doing all the same things I was doing as leader, just without a title. It was a change that I didn't expect to happen, to be honest with you, right? But I'll tell you what I changed differently in that role than what we were traditionally doing is, we were having press conferences, scheduling those things, and I would, I'd have a dozen folks from the media come out there and engaging, and it's building those relationships and being able to tell the story. We were putting together packages. I started an organization called Smart Indy. Happy to go into all those details too. But, I put out 8 different proposals, or as a caucus, we put out 8 different proposals. And in about 8 months, either proposals or amendments, where in the first 5 years, we only put out that same amount. And so, we were going hard, working fast. I think I was going a little bit too fast, right? When I reflect on it, there was a lot of things going on. And, my goal was to really show Indianapolis, and it always still is, show Indianapolis that there are really good ideas on both sides of the aisles. And honestly, I don't really try to make things political, right? I just try and pragmatically show that we have options to make Indianapolis the smartest city in America. But it takes a lot of work to do that. And so I was going really fast, and really that was the crux of the change, is that I wanted to go that speed. I wanted to do these things, but I don't think the rest of everybody else really wanted to go in the same direction I was going.
Well, and that's one of the quotes you had said before was that they said they wanted to return back to the pace that they had, presumably under Brian Mallory when he was minority leader. He was in it for 4 years. You were in it for less than a year. So it sounds like in both cases you would have been, the Republicans were the minority, but you really pulled the gear forward and like, okay, we're going to start doing some work around here. And it sounds like everybody was like, whoa, guy. We're not here to be doing press conferences and all these things. Like, hey, I'm going to come in, represent my district, but you're doing a little too much. Is that?
And in some of the defense, it wasn't all, right? It was just, select a majority few.
Yes.
But,
yes.
That essentially said, their position was different than my position, right? And, I made a commitment at the beginning of it. I said, I'm going to build us a brand. We're going to put out smart policy, and we're going to raise money, because that's really what you have to do when you're an organization.
Of which they voted you to be the minority leader.
Right. I did what I said I was going to do. Apparently, I didn't bring them along the right way that I should have as a leader, right? And so I reflect on that. And in the future, when I'm, if I am in that position again, whether it's here or somewhere else or whatever that might look like, it was a real learning opportunity for me to say, okay, I might have all these ideas. Did I not do a good job explaining, the why behind it? Did I not do a good job of trying to bring them up instead of running too far ahead and then, making them feel like they may have been behind? So there's personal reflections in there too, that there's things I probably could have done better to make sure that I was still the leader today, right? At the end of the day.
Now, how does that process of being voted in, because they then voted you out. So I didn't realize that they could just knock out the leader. Just you're not going to be the leader anymore. Let's take a vote.
Yeah. So the process is normally at the end of every year,
Mm-hmm.
every calendar year in December, we recertify who the leader is.
Right.
And essentially, it's just normally just a quick vote, right? You
Mm-hmm.
just it's 6 of us, so you
Mm-hmm.
just sign your name on a piece of paper and move forward.
Mm-hmm.
At any time, though, I mean, we essentially follow. Both parties do. We follow what's called Robert's Rules of Order.
Mm-hmm.
So you make a motion, you have a discussion, you take a vote, and essentially that's what played out here, right? Is that one of the members made a motion to have a vote on leadership, and then there was a nomination, and then from the nomination came,
Mm-hmm.
Brian essentially, and then there was a vote on who the leader was going to be, and then he came out victorious. So the difference was we did it in the middle of a year, right? And I think it was like right in the beginning
Mm-hmm.
of August
Mm-hmm.
versus doing it in December.
Right. And so now Brian Mallory is back as minority leader.
Correct.
How has that been for you? Because you still work with these people and you're still in the caucus.
Yeah, so I mean, they're still supporting things that I'm putting out there. So
Mm-hmm.
my ideas must not be too crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some things stuck. There's some things about meeting on a more reoccurring basis that I
Mm-hmm.
initiated, and we're continuing to do that
Mm-hmm.
with him back in that seat now. So I think I left an impression, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, I've always been this way, right? I mean, going back to the first time I actually ran for city council, there was something called slating
Mm-hmm.
at the time, and I lost slating.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't get mad about it. I didn't put my head in the sand. I didn't go try and say anything negative about another person. I took my loss, and then I started supporting that
Mm-hmm.
mission and team as a whole. This is no different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I failed to do my job on keeping us all together.
Mm-hmm.
We changed around. There's a new leader now, and I'm not going to stick my head in the sand or say anything negative. I'm going to continue to support them and listen to where they want to go. But at the same time, I've got dozens of ideas. I think the city and people around have a ton of ideas, and I'm going to continue to be here to show them how to express those ideas and how you
Mm-hmm.
can take an idea and actually make something tangible out of it to change and make Indianapolis greater.
I think we've just learned a whole lot about caucus and the rules and what happens because you on the council weren't the only change in a caucus. The Democrats have had their in and out and moving people, and this person left or moved or was kicked out or whatever it was. So it's been an oddly active year on the city county council, something that normally is pretty mundane, I would say. And there's really no fireworks with it.
Right.
But it's been different this year.
It has, and I think, everything, it all goes to, I mean, the sexual harassment investigation,
Mm-hmm.
what was going on in the mayor's office, things that were happening with counselors, right?
Mm-hmm.
In kind of that same vein,
Mm-hmm.
there's been multiple news articles that came out about that. Then obviously you had Jesse Brown and his
Mm-hmm.
position and him leaving the caucus. But I mean, last year or last cycle, it happened with, remember there was a counselor named Ethan Evans.
Yes.
And, he kind of did the same thing
Mm-hmm.
as Counselor Brown, right? He left the caucus. So it's not unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've heard some stories in the past of before my time of, folks trying to do the same thing, whether they're successful or unsuccessful. There was a time that, I think Stephen Clay was the president of the council for a short period of time because
Mm-hmm.
of some things that shook up real quick. So it's not uncommon for it to happen. It just happened to be happening again right now.
Mm-hmm. It also comes at a time where you still had plenty on your plate to deal with. So I don't know if maybe for you it was like, well, now I can focus on all these other things. If there's one council district that everybody's been talking about, it would be yours. Over the past several months. Even when you came before, I can't remember if you had a position on it yet at the time of what we now know would have been a Google data center. But we had talked about the facts of it, and the facts are, and I'll pull up this map here of your district just so everybody sees where we are. Not the greatest map because it's kind of busy, but in this southeast corner of Indianapolis where you see the 20 is Councilor Hart's district. And that is a good, nice little portion of Warren Township but I'd say a larger portion of Franklin Township, right? Or about 50,
Other way around.
Other way around?
Yeah, there's I think 23 precincts in Warren and maybe like 7 in Franklin.
Okay.
So it's certainly heavy Warren.
You've got the northern part of Franklin Township, which would have been an area that had been being scouted as a place to put a data center. And the deal with Franklin Township is that people, actually this map in this case does give you a good picture of density and population where everybody is. If you look over, toward District 21 and 22, you got a lot of land still available, industrial. There aren't a whole lot of people there. It's not packed in tight. And then you see kind of the similar thing over in District 20 and 25. It's not dense, it's not packed, but you have a lot of residential, a lot of subdivisions, not a lot of business, not a lot of commercial, which means you're not generating as much tax dollars as a place obviously like District 13 would be, or 7 or 6 or 16, or pretty much any of the others, or even next door in 24, 23, 22. That, at least in part, is a challenge for the school district because it has asked for a referendum to raise taxes because they're not generating enough commercial tax dollars. Right. Because I believe the district was 85, 86% residential. So in that area, you need some commercial to help bring in some cash. Can't think of anything bigger than Google as far as commercial. And therefore, that's why we saw the school district come out and say, hey, look, we could use that money from Google. But at the same time, there's trade-offs with anything. And so if you're bringing in this data center, it's going to use a lot of energy, electricity, water, and people have learned that, so they're not paying for that, but we in the area pay for that. So that made an interesting dynamic. That's kind of the way back view. The council is now not having to deal with it because Google has withdrawn their bid to put it there. But if it's possible, take us back through, explain it better than I did, of why this was so. This wasn't black or white either way.
No, it wasn't by any means. And I usually put everything in 3.5 buckets, of just large topics that have a lot of data and information to them. Taxes, right? We can stay in taxes for a second here. One of the main issues, and I still have it, I think there's room that needs to be corrected on this, is that the state put together a really large abatement package for the entire state through the IEDC. And this was a few years back that essentially says for large data center developments, you've got energy tax, which is, when we pay our electric bill, you pay a 7% tax on that. On this data center site, they would not pay tax for 50 years on any of that. So 100% abated for 50 years. On sales tax, everybody was throwing out this big number of it's $1 billion investment. Sure, I believe that. It really was. But $650 million of that was just equipment.
Right.
There's no sales tax on any of that equipment, right? And there was no commitment to procure it from Indiana or Indiana suppliers or anything along those lines. So you have no idea where it's coming from, and there's no real benefit to the state.
Benefit.
The next one was where it really starts to hit home is on the personal property equipment tax. So in any business, right, there's chairs, desks, anything inside, right? And in this case, that $650 million that they're going to keep updating all that tech stack inside, and there's value to that stuff. No tax on that for 40 years. And that's the property tax that comes to the locals, that gets split up to the schools, the Health and Hospital Corporation, the city, the infrastructure, the Indigo, all those folks get a cut of that. It was gone. And then there's the land tax, right? The real estate property tax and the building itself, the physical structure. That was abated at 50% for 10 years on a renewal. So they keep renewing that every time if they
Keep
want,
kicking
essentially.
it down the road.
Right. They get to year number 8 and say, we want to redo it again for another 10 years. It's a very common thing. So, but all that was said and done, what is left is essentially Google saying, we'll make a flat payment of $1 million, guaranteed $1 million for the first 5 years. And then after that, it might round up to like 945,000, right? It's close to $1 million, but they were estimating just about 37 million. I believe it was over 40 years, right? And I mean, it would a couple $100,000 to the schools, right? Why this is interesting is during this same time, we had a proposal 2 Mondays back at a full council. It was proposal 274, and it kind of slid under the radar. But it was another response to Senate Bill 1. We moved, so when we get our property taxes and our co-op taxes, we're allowed to not set the rate, right? Because it's just a percentage of what the tax is, like it's 1, 2, 3, right? But we're allowed to shift kind of how we want these percentages to go certain places, right? The schools were actually getting some money from us on county income tax.
Okay.
And we just made a shift 2 weeks ago. I voted against this personally because it was unprepared. But schools just like Warren Central just lost $400,000 that they were getting because we made this shift. And that happened across every single school district. That was about the same amount of money they were going to get from this data center, right?
Over 40 years.
Over 40 years, right. So and that's where I say there's a bigger problem at play here, where we have the state that came in and put out this large tax abatement structure, which I understand their argument. I've talked to the Secretary of Energy on this, and she said, explain why you're doing this. We're trying to grow this, all these reasons. And I said, let me explain without even talking energy. And that was one bucket. And then there's the long-term planning for the community. She goes, okay, I get it. But, I'm explaining this to her, and I said, you've got all those abatements, and then you've got Senate Bill 1, right, that happened this year, where we started our budget negotiation process at a $27 million deficit because of that, and the state wants us to raise our county income tax to make up any difference. So we've got no taxes coming in or no economic benefit other than the jobs during construction, and then we're trying to figure out how to work more with less at this current time. And so when I look at this in a bigger picture, if we're going to start putting in these data centers in Marion County, or really throughout the state for that matter, and we've got $2 billion sitting in reserves right now at the state level, we have to find some sort of support system for local governments, right? And that just wasn't there. And even if it's the schools, right? Google came in and they did their thing, negotiating with the schools kind of behind closed doors again, which was another big problem for the community. They came up with something. I still to this day have no idea what Google, the school, negotiated to get the superintendent to give support. But I think if locals are going to be successful taking on these projects, the state's got to find a way that's going to help supplement them, having after taking away all those and adding all those abatements in. So there's that. When I say one pillar, that's the first pillar, right? And I could give you even more topics on that.
Well, let me ask you on that. So, in case people missed your point, Google giving $1 million a year, that's pennies to Google. That's nothing. There's small businesses that are generating that. So that's giving here's $100. Thanks. That's like the equivalent of that. But the part where when the school district came out and said it, I was wondering, had there been like a recalculation on the tax side to see, okay, well, if Google's here, then we're going to generate now this increased amount of tax dollars. And that wasn't the case.
No. And I talked to the superintendent. He goes, I know there's nothing in it on just the project itself. It's got to be something supplemental. And that's what they negotiated, was something supplemental. And I mean, even on some of these personal property taxes, I think it was another part of Senate Bill 1, the limit was raised on personal property taxes. So to your point, all these other commercial type businesses, even now the ones, like right now the level I think is like $25,000 in personal property equipment. So I own a hair salon, and like we don't have that much stuff inside the hair salon, right? So it's easy, we're exempt. But there are businesses that now, if they were between that, they were paying property taxes on it. now the limit's even higher. So that's another source of, tax contributions that the locals won't see. Again, another product of the state and that Senate Bill 1.
Real quick on that, on the personal property, are you saying that the limit has been raised so you don't have to pay personal property taxes up until you get past this number?
Correct.
Okay. So now it's generating less.
Correct.
The businesses are contributing less tax dollars.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's so, great if you're a small business, right? Absolutely, right? I mean, I'm a small business owner too, and I was taking advantage of, at that even 25 or 50,000 level, right? Yeah. So now the bar has been raised. So good to the business side of the house, but on our side, it's okay. Well, we just got to work with less, right? That's the mentality that I take. But at the same time, it's all right, state, you got to work with this. We keep taking it on the chin, as I'm saying. So, another piece I did to this is I did a small financial just kind of analysis on what could be, right? Because the thing is, the folks down there, they don't want houses, right? We were talking about population density, and it's the one thing I'm able to calculate that anybody with a property tax bill can calculate, right? If you just say, then what I did is I took my property tax bill. Actually, I took somebody's from Franklin Township, because you can get anybody's online if you just pick an address. And I looked at just a median house price of $250,000, which is low, right? I mean, generally you're probably like $325, and I assumed that one person was living in that house making $70,000, which is again very low. I said over that 40-year time span, if 1,000 houses were built in 23-year period, so incrementally growing houses and incrementally growing county income and property taxes, over that 40-year period, $157 million would be generated in tax contributions. And that was my comparison. That was my benchmark. And I wasn't saying that I prefer it to be 1,000 houses, right? But it was, hey, this is what this type generates. And then I actually worked with the IEDI, which was a whole another story on that. We can talk about Jim Schellinger in a minute. Okay. But I said, hey, show me what it would be like for light industrial, light and commercial, and those sorts of developments, right? The ones that really have the meat on the bones for the higher, tax contributions. And it was $180 million over 40 years. And so when you look at these things, you got 180, you got 150, 157, and then you got 37 to 40.
From
Google, right? And that doesn't even get into the quality of life and the energy and all these other things that come along with it. Just, on the surface, what we're dealing with and how we operate just on a tax contribution side of the house, that math didn't work.
I mean, the math on that, as they say, the math doesn't math. I mean, when you're even just going through there, when you're saying, if I put Google here, we're going to make 37 million over 40 years. If I simply keep doing what we're doing and I put houses here, we're going to make 157 million. Or if I choose to put some manufacturing here, we're going to make 180?
180, yeah.
So again, what is the benefit of this 40 when if Franklin Township simply kept doing what it's doing and just added houses, it'd still make more money?
Yeah, and I can argue against myself. Some of the benefits, right, is that with a data center type, you're going to have less community or city services, civil services, so less police runs, right? Less,
because you have less houses,
right? Less kids in school, less potentially less wear and tear on the road, right? Less traffic, certainly, right? Because you're gonna have less houses, less traffic,
right?
So those, it's the operations of just the part of town running, right?
Yes.
The day-to-day life that is less impactful in.
There's not a lot of needs with a data center.
The moves, right? But on the other hand, you have 4 300,000 square foot buildings that are 65 foot tall, right in the middle of suburban Franklin Township, right? And I think that's what, it on the map. Yeah, you can see it's green land, but there's still a bunch of houses in and around there. It's not absent of housing by any means. And there's folks that have lived there 40 plus years. And, I would just remind everybody all the time when I was going through this process, drive up 69 and just look at IKEA and tell me you can hide that behind a 25-foot berm. And that was the plan, right? Well, we're going to put a 25-foot berm. It's going to sit back 200 feet and there's going to be, trees on top of the berm. 65 feet tall. It's 300. And it's hard to just fathom being inside. I went and actually was inside a building that was 300,000 square feet the other day. It was it's on Brookville Road. It's on Southeastern Avenue. It's the McAllister Machinery Company. I went and met with those guys and I toured their facility. And I was just like, how big is this? And he goes, oh, it's about 350,000 square
Mhm.
feet. I'm like, okay, well, now I know.
Mhm.
And it's massive.
Mhm.
And I just couldn't imagine that running all the time. At the property line on this, for going back to quality of life, it would be a 65 constant decibel sound. So to compare, 65 decibels is the sound of a vacuum.
Okay.
So imagine at the property line of where this data center is, you're going to hear
A vacuum.
a vacuum all the time.
Mhm.
And they have to back it up with generators.
Mhm.
And I did a site tour. There's a very small data center. It's 80,000 square feet.
Okay.
It's right next to my district. It's in District 4, I believe it's 14.
Okay.
It's in the old Eastgate Mall.
Yeah.
And they have 7 generators. They have to test them daily. And they're as big as a pickup truck.
Mhm.
I mean, they're massive,
Mhm.
right? And they test them daily. I did the math, and if you had just as many backup generators at this site, he had 7 for 80,000 square feet. And if you had that ratio at 4 buildings at 300,000 square feet, you would have over 100,
Right.
just right at
Yeah.
100. 100 generators. You have to
Turn them on every
you've
day.
heard the little one, right?
Mhm.
At like
Mhm.
a
Yeah.
cookout or
Yeah. Yeah.
like a tailgate or
Mhm.
like when the emergency kind of thing. Imagine one the size of a pickup truck
Mhm.
being tested every day. Now there was a commitment that they wouldn't test over like 31 hours in a year,
Mhm.
but I think the test is like you can turn it on. Does it fire up and does it run for 5 to 6 minutes?
Right.
Right. So 31 hours might not look like a lot,
Mhm.
but you can really stretch that out
Mhm.
when you have to test those things weekly. And when you got 100, you're going to test 100 in one day, or you're going to test 100 over 7 days. And
Mhm.
those sorts of details were never worked out.
Right. Because in theory you say, oh, they're gonna do it like we do the tornado siren once a week. So are we gonna do it all once a week and it's one and done, or is it okay? We're gonna test 20 today, 20 tomorrow, and then you're hearing this noise every day.
Yes. And
Okay.
so, I mean, the intrusiveness of all of that, I mean, to me, I got to do my job to empathize, right? At the end of the day, I'm the spokesperson. Like I speak for all these folks that live in and around there. That's what they literally elected me to do. I say it all the time, I'm the middleman, right? And by and large, even still, now that we're through it, right? I've never seen so many people engaged on a topic.
Yeah.
There were 400 people that showed up Monday night
Mhm.
to support and remonstrate this. In my 6 years on the council, there's only been one other time I've seen a crowd similarly as large. It wasn't as large, but it was when we had the General Orders Board come in for the first time. And you had, police officers, families, wives, daughters, friends, brothers, neighbors, all in blue shirts and everything. But still then, this beat that. And that just tells me that, I read the room right. I took the temperature right. I think I made the right decision at the end of the day. I know and I recognize that there's always going to be a group of people that are mad about the decision I made. That is the reality of being a counselor, is that.
Well, take everybody back. Have you all for those who are just catching up, where did you end and where did you start on the idea?
Yeah, so I started the idea just open-minded and optimistic. It started in December of 2024, and I just had my ears open, and I met with everybody. I met with AES, citizens, Google, the attorneys, the remonstrating groups, the local civic leagues, other energy providers. I met with my personal network. I toured data centers. There's the Secretary of Energy. I met with the IEDI, the IEDC. There was, I can't tell you how many meetings I had over this. I could probably write a small book on what not to do and what to do for anybody considering a data center at this point. And I waited actually until the day of the hearing examiner. And so the way it works is, there's a hearing examiner that the petition goes to, and she'll review it or he'll review it, and they'll say, okay, here's the petitioner's stance, which is the petitioner's the person for it, and then if there's a remonstrator, they'll give their position, and there's a procedure behind that, and they have to give a recommendation at the end of the day. And her recommendation was 4. But what was interesting, and that's when I finally made my ultimate position, was in front of her, and that was in August of 2025. So I went from December 24 to August 25, not saying a position, and finally made it in front of her. And it was, look, I'm not even finalizing my decision because there's still work to be done, could be done before we go to the Development Commission, the Metropolitan Development Commission. But certain things need to change on the energy side, on the tax side. If they do, I could change my mind. We're not done. So what happened that day is she basically made a decision and said, I'm going to support this, only because I know no matter what decision I make, somebody's going to appeal it.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, there's all these kind of little caveats throughout where they ultimately are used, against the remonstrators down the line. Like, well, the MDC supported it, or
Mm-hmm.
the hearing examiner just supported, or the Civic League supported it. But there's all these caveats. Like when the Civic League supported it, they did it under the guise that they would get a list of commitments to help protect their community. But at the same time, the president of that Civic League wrote a personal letter of opposition,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they did it at a time without any information.
Right.
And when all this was under NDA. So what's the validity of that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And same with the hearing examiner. There's the caveat of, I know it's going to get it appealed, so I'll just say yes anyway and let it move forward. Well, then it gets to the MDC. And what folks have to know about this is that the MDC, they'll get a packet of information. I hope they're reading all of it, but there's a lot of information, right? I mean, that's 7 months, 8 months worth of information that we were going through, and it took me a lot of time. They've got to look at a packet, maybe they do have a pre-hearing on it, but then they hear 20 minutes from a petitioner, and they hear 20 minutes from a demonstrator, and then they make their decision. And, I looked at that, and I went to that meeting too, and I spoke in front of those guys, and ultimately they voted in favor of it, 8-1. There's 9 people on there. What was also interesting about that meeting is there's an organization, a new organization in Indianapolis called the IEDI.
Okay.
So essentially, we had something called Develop Indy that used to run under Visit Indy, and it was started, I think, under Ballard. And it may have been, there's always been some form of this type of economic development group under a mayor, and it's been moved around here and there. So it's not uncommon to have one, and they just get renamed. But it was under the chamber. Then Hogsett wanted to bring it back under the city. It's not technically under the city. They're still technically a nonprofit, but the city pays for it, right? Me, if you live in a city, you're paying $1 million a year for this group called the IEDI to try and attract and retain business. Well, by the time we got around that point, I was working with those guys weekly saying, this is what we have to do. If you want my support, this is what has to get done. And they just wouldn't do it. I said, I can't support it. And at one point I made an observation, and I think it was in front of the hearing examiner, that the president of AES was on the board of IEDI. And like, regardless of who the person is, right, just the role itself being on there was problematic for me when both of those organizations, the IEDI and AES, were writing letters of support for this project, primarily because who stands to benefit the most out of this project outside of Google is AES and Citizens Energy, because that's going to be the biggest expense, is certainly electricity. So I made a comment to the hearing examiner that those letters should be just disregarded, because there's, benefit from those organizations. Of course, they're going to support it. Well, I really made the leader of the IEDI really mad for saying that. And I didn't throw any person under a bus. It was just the role itself. Well, I encourage anybody to go watch this video. It's the craziest thing. And I've had other counselors tell me this is the craziest thing they've ever seen. So the person that's appointed, his name's Jim Schellinger.
Okay.
And he gets in front of this MDC and just gives the wildest presentation, essentially starting off saying everything has gone wrong, that Google did this terribly by keeping it in secret, by keeping people on the sideline. And then he pivots his attention to me and basically said, Michael Hart is, a deceiver. I don't know if he uses the word deceiver or anything along that, but he basically throws me under the bus, says I'm not half the person the CEO of AES is, and that there's no collusion between any of this. And I'm sitting there going, this, I've never, I mean, I get thrown on the bus all the time. Don't get me wrong, that's normal. But in this setting, to be disparaged by the person who is supposed to be working for the taxpayers, right? And he's working against them, gets up there and then rambles on and eventually says, we have to pass this to see what's in it. And just from then on, it was one of those, it then just got weird. I mean, from that day on, it got weird working with the IEDI. That's when we started seeing them trying to lobby other counselors, whether it's on the Republican caucus or the Democrat caucus, them organizing meetings with the school, working with the petitioner more than they were working with the council, right? The folks that were the ones writing them $1 million check every year to do it. And so, we ultimately,
and again, that would be the Right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that at least is the job of the IDEI, because their job is to get business in the city. But it's, I guess, I mean, part of the tactic is that you got to bring people to the table.
Certainly. So what was interesting is, when I'd be in meetings with them, like
Mhm.
and just in our closed kind of room, they're not private
Right,
meetings,
right, right.
but they would always say to me, "We work for you. We work
Mhm.
for the citizens. We need to make you happy. What do you want us to do?"
Mhm.
And we did that on 2 other projects, and it went very smoothly.
Mhm.
Um, I had a Kimball Electronics jobs come in. There's 300 jobs. We had, a good tax abatement structure that worked out well for everybody. Highly involved, and they did exactly what they were going to do. We had another one with the Thunderbird District, similar in the area, another 200 jobs, another tax abatement package, smaller, shorter term,
Mhm.
worked out really well. They did a great job with that. But then it seemed to be when they didn't get what they wanted.
Mhm.
And then when there was a difference of opinion between me and them, it was they were going to like take their ball and go home and then fight about it. Versus, okay, we got to a point where there were 17 counselors publicly saying they don't support this, and then they are still working in the other direction to try and make it happen.
Mhm.
And that's the problem, right? I can see, yes, they do have a job, they do have a
Right.
responsibility, back in I think 2023.
But once you're hearing from the people that, hey, we don't want this.
Right. You have to change the tone, and whether it's trying to find a way to make it work. But there wasn't a way again, I tried to get them to bring in more dollars, right?
Mhm.
We didn't get there. I tried to get, a lot of things for the community. I got shut down. I got told
Mhm.
no. And then, I think that's where my NDA comes in, is like what I asked for and all those sorts of things and some
Mhm.
names of people. But I can say I asked for a lot of stuff,
Mhm.
millions of dollars worth of
Mhm.
stuff. And I was told no on these items. There was one item they told me yes to, and it was kind of like, okay, yeah, we'll do that.
Mhm.
So it was, I think moving forward, even on that whole subject to IEDI, there's other counselors that
Mhm.
came to me, Democrat counselors that came to me and said, we got to like look at these guys, and is this the right structure
Mhm.
for Indianapolis to where they're the ones deciding, or should the council have some oversight overview of this organization?
Mhm.
Because we do in other capacities.
Explain some of the what you can of the NDA. Who is that with? Because people are wondering, why was this so secret? It wasn't until recently that people really found out that it was Google behind this. But as you said, this has been going on for a while. Who's the NDA with? Is that with Google or the IDEI, and why is that necessary?
It was actually with Google's holding company.
Okay.
I think it's Deepwater Ventures,
Okay.
and so there was a couple reasons of the why, which, retrospect, still glad I signed it, right?
Hmm.
One, and I tell everybody, like, my job is to be at the table, and if that's how I was going to be at the
Yeah.
table,
Yeah.
then I'm signing the thing, right?
Hmm.
Do I think it broke community trust immediately? Absolutely.
Hmm.
So I don't recommend that a company do it,
Hmm.
because it's you're starting from behind in
Hmm.
that regard.
But if you don't sign it, you can't be in the room.
But then I couldn't be in the room, right? So, I'm going to sign them if I have to be there. But what was interesting about it is, over time, almost all of this information that was under NDA ultimately came out.
Hmm.
So, like like it being Google, the chairman of the MDC said, "I'm not hearing this unless you tell me exactly who it is."
Hmm.
And they, "Oh, we're Google," you know what I mean? And so the only things that are left are maybe some of the names of the sellers. I think that
Hmm.
was primarily, maybe the biggest part they wanted to try and protect, was who those folks are.
Hmm.
You can look up a property record though, so
Right.
it's not like
Because
it's.
what was the location supposed to be?
It was essentially, at Troy Avenue, Post Road, 74,
Yep.
Vandergrift, and all that on set. And then there was a little extra spot that popped up into Warren Township that they're potentially considering like future development site
Okay.
there. But that was it. Then there was the name. Again, and it started with, the money part was under NDA at the beginning,
Hmm.
but then they released the money part. The commitments that I try to negotiate with them, those are still there. I don't think they've ever came out in public, so I don't want to violate the thing. So I've
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
it's kind of a mute point at this point. The names of the individuals from Google, I think, would be probably still under NDA.
Hmm.
Um, but by and large, I wouldn't recommend any petitioner to do that. The thing that I was surprised by in this whole process is that I've got little, and I say little, but it's a big company, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I had two companies come in. I just mentioned them before, that Kimball and Thunderbird. Kimball they're bringing 300 jobs, right? That's a big company still. Don't
Mm-hmm.
get me wrong, but they're little compared to Google, right? Those guys would bend over backwards to answer my phone calls, to answer any questions, take time out, do whatever, do anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it was the complete opposite with Google. It was
Mm-hmm.
almost like this sense of entitlement of,
Mm-hmm.
nah, we're Google, right?
Right.
And I think that drove just uh, a stake through the heart of the community of, okay, you're coming out to these community meetings, but you're sending an attorney to do so, and you're giving us vague information, vague answers of, hey, what are you going to do with water? I don't know. It depends. How much electricity are you going to use? I don't know. It depends. How's it going to impact the wells? I don't know. It could depend. And it was essentially that over and over again. And that trust just kept on continuing to erode. I mean, even before that, it was, we want zoning and then we'll talk about commitments.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going, getting in front of the whole, like 100 people in a room and looking at the attorney and saying, like, that's not how it works here. Right. The way it works is we're going to do them at the same time. This was before I even made a decision, because, and I tell everybody this and anybody that listens, if you have a zoning opportunity, that is your power as the people in the area, because once zoning is passed, you probably never see those people again. They have no need to come back to your community because they have what they need from you. And that's where you have to get everything you want. If you're going to support that development, or you think it's going to go through, even if you don't support it,
Mm-hmm.
you got to get exactly, it could be housing development, right? They talk about all this high density housing. If a counselor's doing a good job, you can discuss the type of siding, the number of shutters, the space in the yard, extra amenities. You can get road repair done in and around that area. You can focus on drainage issues. You can force a developer to do that type of work, even on residential development. But it helps when the communities pay attention. It really helps when a counselor pays attention. So, that's the big learning lesson from all of this, is that NDAs, absolutely not effective, right? But at the end of the day, did it really hide all that much information? Not really.
I guess I'm curious to know what Franklin Township Schools was going to get the Google football stadium at the Franklin Central High School or something. We'll never know.
We'll never know. We'll never know.
As you've even mentioned, there are other data centers in the area. The other one in your district, much smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Is this? And I've heard of talk of another one in the Brightwood area being proposed. And it seems pretty much everybody, the overwhelming sentiment from the public is, okay, we defeated this. Like, we didn't want this, we didn't need this. It's gone, but something's going to pop up again. What, in an area where they're still trying to figure out, how do we support this school system and the taxes, and what is this area going to be? Because if there's a side of town that you can develop on still, it'd be Franklin Township.
Right.
What's the future over there?
I'm glad you asked. So I love spending time in the space, and I try and bring my whole district together when I get this question.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because on the north, this is the most southern part of my district.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And Washington Street is almost the most northern part. I do have a sliver that runs up to 21st Street.
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, that is the border. The top border is
Mm-hmm.
Washington Street for me. And with that, I've probably talked about before, I've got the Washington Square Mall on, right? And so, these things are correlated in the sense that when I'm trying to redevelop not just the mall, but all these vacant strip malls and everything else
Mm-hmm.
on Washington Street, and I'm out there talking to developers or landowners, shoot, I'm trying to sell not vacant spots, but when you've got a little strip mall space and you've got a spot here and then a couple empty ones, I'm on the phone with Einstein's Bagel or Chicken Salad Chick, and I'm saying, hey, you should come check this out. I'm calling Costco to say, come visit me out. I want to show you all of this opportunity you have over here. I'm calling people all the time to come in or build new or knock down. I mean, there's a whole LA Fitness just sitting there empty because they left on Washington Street. I need somebody to come in and either knock that thing down or do something creative with it. And I talk to people all the time about this. But what they always bring up to me is, you don't have enough people. And it's an interesting dichotomy is that on the south side of on the very south side of the district,
Mm-hmm.
right,
Mm-hmm.
there's the concern from people of we've got too many people.
Mm-hmm.
And
because it compared to what it was 10, 20 years ago, Franklin Township, Perry Township, there's a whole lot more people there than it used to be.
yes. And so it's it's a hard balance because
Mm-hmm.
I've got literally the exact opposite things being told to me on the goals of what I believe, by and large I was elected to do, which is to help reinvigorate Washington Street.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a middle ground down there in that land. It is 468 acres. Ultimately, I think there's a lot of mixed use opportunity down there, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we look at it now, most of it's zoned agriculture. But if you look at the comprehensive plan, it has zoning for residential, commercial, and light industrial.
Mm-hmm.
So a big chunk of this is it runs up against I-74.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to build a house
right
next to 74, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can put industrial there and it's
Mm-hmm.
going to make sense,
Mm-hmm.
right? You've got South Post Road that
Mm-hmm.
runs straight to the highway
Mm-hmm.
right there. And there's a great highway, on and off ramp.
Mm-hmm.
And there's already commercial there, right? There's opportunity to do that commercial type development
Mm-hmm.
up Post Road to a certain point. But then when you get to the Troy and the Davis and the Vandergrift,
Mm-hmm.
you've got residential.
Yep, you're back in residential.
And so, that's where to me it's mixed use, and it's the comprehensive plan in this case is pretty well spot on. Now the kicker is that's what the plan says, but
Mm-hmm.
who's got the money and who's going to build what
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day? That's ultimately what makes the decision. I think there's a bigger part at play here too, where for a long time people usually react to what is coming,
Mm-hmm.
but in this moment of kind of downtime, right, where there's no active
Mm-hmm.
petitions for the area, what should happen and what I would encourage to happen, and I'm happy to be a part of it to make it happen, is planning. The community can at least put out an idea of what they think would be a good idea for that. It's
Mm-hmm.
not uncommon, right? If you look at sometimes they get to a nice funded stage, like right now there's a quality of life plan being funded by LISC for the Far East Side,
Mm-hmm.
and that's being run through the Far East Side Neighborhood Association and Cafe and some of those
Mm-hmm.
other like prominent groups over there.
Mm-hmm.
They're putting together a plan for what looks good.
Mm-hmm.
Their option is available without getting the massive dollars, but that's what a mayor's office, I believe, is looking for, right? They want the community to be involved, but they want the ideas too, and that's what the IEDI wants,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I think we have an opportunity to bridge that gap. But there is no plan at the moment, right? There's no plan from the city other than this high overlay of zoning,
Mm-hmm.
but there has to be a plan to move forward, or else it's just going to keep being a reactionary type of situation. But for me, it's mixed use.
Well, I'm fascinated with this map and what you have because Washington Street, as you said, is like your northernmost border, but that is that is one Main Street, Indianapolis. But as there's a lot of room for opportunity on Washington Street, and then while I think people think that Washington Street and Franklin Township are really far apart, or actually not at all.
No.
You slip. I to cut down traffic when I'm coming from the east side, I go Post Road to Brookville.
Oh, yeah.
And then you go one more light. Now you're in Franklin Township.
Yeah.
But over there is just so much room, be it currently cornfield or it's manufacturing or it's commercial, that is open. And so even as you look at this map, you can just kind of see the white. It doesn't indicate that there's nothing there, but it is. It correlates to what is available and what there's room to grow in that area.
Certainly.
I just find it just very interesting because that's a very interesting part of town. I guess what are people saying they want to see on that side of town? Because Franklin Township, I'd say, is the most. I don't even think this wouldn't even be an assumption. Just the facts are, there's probably more subdivisions in Franklin Township than like put together anywhere in the city. It feels like to me, like Franklin Township is nothing but subdivisions and schools.
Right, yeah, that's much of it, right? And then
Yeah.
every now and then you'll get like a 3-suite building with maybe
Yes.
like a bar and
a gas station.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 But there's no major type of development.
Right.
Um, I've heard everything ranging from, like one, they really want a community center down there,
Mhm.
but that doesn't generate tax contributions really. I mean, it potentially could if you model it off like a Hancock County health center. They do a great job a little bit farther down Brookville Road.
Mhm.
But I sat down and so I talked to folks in Franklin Township, and they're really gunning for one of those. And that site would, I mean, there's plenty of room on that
Mhm.
site for something like that. Grocery store actually was brought up to me, and like for me, I live 4 minutes from the northeast corner of this site, so I go straight up and I go to Meyer on Washington Street, and a lot of these folks I would imagine go down to Thompson, and then you've got
Thompson and Emerson, Southport and Emerson right there too.
yeah, and so you got all those things. I mean, I don't, I've heard it, right? So I'm just gonna say I've heard it. People have said it to me, but they mainly say it in the phrase of they just want the tax. They don't say the business type, right? They just say we want the 2 to 3% tax rate. And playing devil's advocate a little bit, there was, and I get why it died, right? Because it would have been a terrible situation for water drainage and how it impacted the creek down there, Buck Creek. But there was like a Five Below. And it seems like they keep getting these massive developments because it was a 1 million square foot logistics site that was coming in, I think, a year and a half ago. This was in Councilor Mowry's district. But that was defeated down there, and it was kind of right around the corner. Then you had this come in, and it was this massive, all right, we're going to take all 468 acres, right? And I think that the sentiment from folks is they want like the opportunity to have like the stores, I don't want to say mom and pop, but just your regular stores that you would see anywhere else. Because like
some shopping plazas.
Yeah, and that's even arguable, right? Because I mean, look, I've got a bunch of empty ones on Washington Street that can't even get filled up. So is that really what you need? When I talk to the development community, and this isn't necessarily the resident community, but during COVID, there was just an explosion of these large warehouses, like hundreds of thousands of square feet. And if you go over to like McCordsville and South, just over in Hancock County, it's just a sea of them. What there's not a lot of, and there's a high demand for, are smaller 50,000 kind of square foot buildings where you would have like an HVAC type of company, right? Where in the front there may be 2 offices, a reception area, and then a small warehouse in the back. That sort of development is high in demand, and that would be great like on this post road corridor where they have a couple things like that. But there's going to be probably something big by that highway where you would see, a couple 100,000 square feet. But yeah, by and large, folks just want, additional places that are convenient for them. But it's got to work at the end of the day.
We're just about out of time. I was going to ask you talk about Washington Street. We only have just a couple seconds left, but Blue Line's coming through. Starting to see that construction pop up right there. Like I said, I go through Post and Washington Street almost every day, so I'm starting to see the lane closures and everything. Things looking up. You think on that side of town?
I'm optimistic. I spend most of my time trying to attract business there. I look at the amenities of the area, and I think there's a ton of good ones. We've got the Pennsy Trail, which, last night, I had a learning lesson about. There's a lot of other activity going around that I've got another project I'm working on, but there are good amenities, right? You got the Pennsy Trail. There's a Target, right? I mean, there's all those shopping. You've got a movie theater there that. I mean, honestly, inside secret, that is one of the best movie theaters. You wouldn't know it, but it's always clean, like ridiculously clean, because nobody really goes there, and it's quiet. So I'm going to give you.
Are you talking about the one that used to be the $1.50 movie?
I always went to the Movies 8 for the $1.50
Yeah,
movie.
yeah.
But no, this is on like Washington. It's AMC.
Okay.
Right next to the mall. And it's a great movie theater. But anyway, when I talk to developers, there's all these amenities. You got the Blue Line, and I can argue both sides of it, right? I can argue that there will be a beautification effort that comes from it, but I can argue that it will have impact on traffic. On the same time, I can argue that traffic is worse on Emerson Avenue than it is on Washington Street, which it shouldn't be. I would like to see Washington Street as busy as Emerson Avenue. That means people are here. But at the same time, I've always been very vocal that I don't like the dedicated lane model just
Mhm.
because how it chops off a lot of left turn traffic
Mhm.
from ancillary streets,
Mhm.
right? And so I don't believe it's an efficient model today,
Mhm.
but I do think that there's opportunity around student housing
Mhm.
because we've got all this explosion going. I mean, like what Purdue, they say a couple $1 billion
Mhm.
worth of investment in downtown
Mhm.
now that they've split from IU, and
Mhm.
I think there's an opportunity to utilize that system, and that's the way I always look at everything is I want to make the best out of any
Right.
situation, right? This is what we have,
Won't get everything you want.
so how do we make the best out of it? And I
Mhm.
think it's certainly going to be less expensive to live over on the east side than it would to be downtown. I think it's a mischaracterization that the east side is dangerous. It's not dangerous over there. I feel very safe
Mhm.
over on Washington Street, and where I live, I have no problem. I live 4 minutes from Washington Street. Um, but I think we have a great opportunity with college, with that line, potentially even on some of these sites to
Mhm.
where if we can make it rideable for maybe that crowd, or there's actually a senior housing
Mhm.
shortage where folks are kind of aging out some of these bigger houses that you
Yep.
see in these suburbs, right?
Mhm.
And more senior community style living where again they can ride and they can get to
Mhm.
the things that we want over on that side of town,
Mhm.
right? We want more than just I mean, trust me, we love Olive Garden and we love Longhorn, but that's all you got, right? And I'll eat Mexican food until my belly's full, but I think we got enough of them.
Mhm.
People want to see some other options. They want to see these more and people shop, they come out.
Mhm.
But we got to get those people. And so I think that's, how the blue line plays its part in that is I think there's, ways that I'll continue to try and attract development. Some may not consider it an asset, some may, right?
Mhm.
It's there. Right. And so it's a tool for me,
Mhm.
just like some of these other opportunities. I've got a potential nature preserve right around the
Okay.
corner, 100 square foot or 100-acre flatwood forest that I'm actively always trying to get money in the budget to buy this thing. Because
Mhm.
again, if I can get more assets in the community, I can attract more business
Mhm.
and I can attract more of the things that people really want
Mhm.
and revitalize the east side. And that's ultimately the goal.
Well, hey, look, I always enjoy talking to you, and I like how you break things down and go into things, and you've told us things that we didn't even know. How can people get in touch with you so they can talk with you?
Couple ways. One way is always michaelpaulhart.com. But more recently, I also created an organization called Smart Indy. And Smart Indy goes back to all these things I said about communities really owning their community. And what I'm doing through that is breaking down some of these big topics. Like right now, I've got one on homelessness,
Mhm.
right? Where we're actually hosting a meeting down in Fountain Square and we're bringing in community leaders who are not receiving city funding
Mhm.
that are having an impact on housing and homelessness and can show their results.
Mhm.
And so the public's going to be invited. It's being hosted down there, but that's what Smart Indy is, right? Smart Indy it's out there to show people how to take back their community. That you don't have to be political. It's a non-political. I mean, it's a PAC, but
Mhm.
it's an organization to grow and make Indianapolis the smartest city in America.
All right, Michael Paul Hart, Counselor District 20, where there's been nothing going on, quiet, boring, nothing happening out there. Thanks for making some time in your very quiet schedule to come talk to us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Fox 59 tonight. I'm Cameron Riddle. Thanks for joining us. I'll talk to you Sunday morning on my radio show Open Lines on WTLC and Hot 100.9. And we'll be back here on another night at 8 o'clock to talk about what's happening in and around Indy. Have a good night.